that's some really helpful advice. I super appreciate it. Oh, hey, can you hang on just a second? I have to introduce the video. Let's talk about community. Hi, everybody. My name is Mitch Goldstein, and welcome to How to Be a Design Student. So this week I want to talk about a really, really important topic. I was asked recently on Instagram by the Indian River State College Graphic Design and Digital Media Club. They're out of Florida. They asked a really good question, which I'm going to read here for you today. Quote, your thoughts/advice on how to build up a design community, ways to support it, etc., particularly after you've graduated. I think this is an absolutely phenomenal question. Thank you very much, the people of Indian River State College, for asking that. So, community. Let's talk about what a community is, why it matters, how to either find or make a community, and then what to do once you get there. So, why does a community matter? I think a community matters for lots of different reasons, but broadly speaking, it matters to you creatively and it matters to you professionally. Creatively, just having people around you that are sort of equally interested in stuff that you are somewhat more or less equally interested in is extremely, extremely important. I have found after I graduated, that was one of the worst parts of graduating, was that community that you have at school sort of disappears immediately. I think having a community of people who are interested in what you're interested lets you have a lot of high-level dialogue about what you're doing as an artist or a designer. It lets you be engaged in sort of a conversation about the craft of what you do at a really high level. It's great that your parents might support you, or you have other friends who are like accountants and things who might support you. It's a lot different when you have somebody who actually kind of really understands the ins and outs of what you're talking about. And I think those kinds of people are also people that are great to bounce ideas off of. If you're having a problem getting a project done, or you're about to tackle a really big piece and you kind of don't quite know how to get into it, you've got these people in your community that you can talk to, not necessarily to get yes or, thumbs up or thumbs down from, but just to be able to bounce some ideas off of. And so people who kind of understand where you're coming from, who are kind of in it with you, I think is really important. And lastly, I think community can help you sort of expand your knowledge. You're going to have people who are certainly interested in things you're interested in, but also know stuff you've never even thought about before. And so being able to access people in your community who can kind of give you some insight into other maybe roads or parallel ideas to what you've been comfortable doing, I think is absolutely amazing. In terms of the professional aspect of community, obviously we all understand networking is really important. And I certainly do think that's a very valid part of community. I do think that lots of opportunities, a lot of jobs, a lot of potential projects can absolutely come from other people in your community. And similarly, you as like an artist or designer can give opportunities to other people. If you are a designer and you have a client who needs a thing you don't know how to do, maybe you do graphic design and they want video editing, instead of kind of maybe fumbling your way through it, you can refer them to another person in your community. And that's great for everybody. It's great for the client because they're going to get probably a very high level of work. It's great for you because the client knows that you can solve their problems for them, which is great. And it's great for the person you're handing it off to because they're going to get paid to do what they know how to do. So that part of community is like a two-way street. You can get stuff, but you can also give stuff is really good. Obviously, community is a great place to find a mentor. If you feel like maybe you're a little lost or you're out of school and you can't quite figure out the road you're going, finding somebody who's maybe a little more experienced, who's been around the block a little more, part of your community, can be an amazing, amazing thing. I've been lucky enough to have mentors, and it is a phenomenal, phenomenal thing. And lastly, you kind of just have somebody you can unload on a little bit. You have people you can talk shop with, go get a drink, get a coffee, and just talk about whatever miserable experience maybe you had that week dealing with someone. And it's just really nice to be able to commiserate like that. It sounds kind of silly, but I actually think it's really important to be able to kind of unload like that and get some stuff off your chest with people who've either been there or know exactly what you're talking about. So the most important aspect of community, no matter what else I talk about today, this is the thing that I really want you all to remember. By far the most important part of community is that you need to be active. Community is an active endeavor. It is not a passive one. When you go to an event, you should be talking to people. If you go to a workshop, you should be engaging with the people at the workshop, things like that. You got to remember, anybody who is in this community is there because they want to be, not necessarily because they have to be. Therefore, they are probably interested in the same kinds of things that you are interested in. So you guys have got a lot to talk about. I really think if you just kind of very sort of sit back and kind of let community sort of happen around you, I'm not saying it's useless, but you're really not going to get a whole lot out of it. So being active in the community, it's extremely important. And I'll get into more of that in just a minute. Let's talk about community at school. Here's the good news. You're done. You already have a community because you are at college and it already exists. That's one of the wonderful things about higher education. And honestly, part of what you're paying for when you go to college is to be inside of this community immediately. And I think it is a wonderful, wonderful thing. All you need to do is participate. You need to go to lectures. You should go to openings that are on or off campus and things like that. If there are workshops happening, if visiting guests are coming in and doing things, you should go to those things. It is part of the experience. A lot of schools have clubs, either like specific to a discipline or maybe specific to a major. They might have workshops set up. They might have field trips going on. You really should do as much of that as you possibly can. Now, having said that, you cannot do it all, and you shouldn't expect to do everything. You don't have time to do literally every single possible thing. I just don't think that's reality. So you are more than welcome to pick and choose things that make some sense to you, but I do think you should stretch what those edges are sometimes. Maybe go to an opening you have no clue about, or maybe go to a lecture or a field trip that maybe you're not super interested in, but you can go to. I think that's really important. And I would say, generally speaking, on college campuses, most stuff is pretty accessible. At RIT, where I teach, we have a large deaf and hard of hearing population. It's generally very easy to have an interpreter or a captionist or both show up to any sort of these events. So I do think that accessibility, especially while you're at school, is generally pretty much ready to go. Not always, but generally speaking, it's pretty ready to go, which is great. So I think as long as you're participating in stuff, you're doing stuff, you're not just sitting in your dorm room alone, you're going out and doing things, I think college is an amazing place to experience community for the first time in sort of a professional context. It really is your first professional community. Now, community after you graduate can actually be significantly more challenging. In school, you were surrounded automatically by all these people who are sort of into what you're into, and then you graduated and it all kind of went away. And I think it can be really difficult to get back. A lot of times after you graduate, you move to a brand new city you're not familiar with. It can be really challenging. So I think there's basically two communities that you can sort of tap into. There's communities that already exist that you can enter, and you have an opportunity to make your own community. So to start with, let's talk about what I would call a pre-made community or a pre-existing community. And just like in school, there are all sorts of things that sort of exist, but it's a little harder to go out and find them. On a national or international level, you can always join some professional organizations. There's things like AIGA, AIA for architecture, Society of Environmental Graphic Designers, there's the Industrial Design Society of America, things like that. In the arts, there's stuff like CAA, NAIA, the Illustrator Society, the Furniture Society, there's NCECA for ceramic artists, things like that. These all exist, and they are all valuable in different ways. And so that's a really nice way to just sort of instantaneously enter a community. The problem is a lot of these do cost money. Some are cost very little money, some cost what seems like an awful lot of money. So there is kind of a catch to that. The good news is sometimes your job might actually pay for you to be a part of these communities. They might pay for it as professional development. Take advantage of that if they will do that. There's also less sort of medium or discipline-specific things that are out there. Stuff like museums might offer like a lecture series and things like that that you should go to. There's things like Creative Mornings, which does a lot of like early morning lectures and pachakachas and things like that. Those are really good. And then there's things that are like First Fridays. Most cities and towns that have any kind of an art scene at all has a First Friday of every month. Everything is kind of opening. There are shows opening, art openings, things like that. A lot of stuff happens in the city that you're in terms of studio crawls, things like that. Open studio days often happen on First Fridays, but not always. There is stuff like that that you can do. And then you can do stuff like travel to stuff. So if you're in any of these big organizations, a lot of them have a national conference that you can go to. There are also some regional conferences you can go to. Those can be absolutely amazing, and that's actually almost worth an entire another video, just sort of understanding what conferences can do for you. But broadly speaking, it can be really, really valuable, but once again, it is not necessarily free, which might make it somewhat inaccessible to some of you. So that is something to just kind of keep in mind. And lastly, there is social media, which, again, has its own kind of toxic hellscape to it. But it is a good way to sort of find communities both by discipline and by geography. You can search on Instagram and things for medium or discipline and also for location. And that might be a really good way to tap into people and tap into the community when you really kind of don't know anybody yet, especially when you move to a new place. So there are definitely a lot of ways to enter into pre-existing communities, but you do have to find them. And then the other option, if you either can't find or don't like the pre-existing communities, is to make your own community. Make a homegrown community. Again, million ways to do this, but I would think of things like starting a critique group. That is something that I've actually done with some friends and colleagues locally here. It is amazing just having people meet every few weeks, once a month, at somebody's studio to look at what they're doing and talk about it at a really high level has been absolutely amazing. It costs nothing. Highly, highly recommend you do that. That's a really good way to start to build a community. You could organize a group show. Again, most cities and towns have some gallery spaces, multifunction spaces, community spaces. It doesn't have to be some fancy gallery for it to be really interesting. Organize a show. Invite people in the community to participate. That could be a really good way to do that. You could do a studio crawl where you just get a whole bunch of people who have studios. You say, hey, next Thursday night, we're all going to go around everybody's studio, have the doors open, let's go. That can be really amazing. You could do something as simple as just like a meetup. Hey, people in industrial design in this town I live in, let's go get a coffee at this place at 2 o'clock in the afternoon one day. And let's just hang out. Things like that are really easy. You can even make a workshop or do a lecture, just your own lecture series. You could do it in your living room. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be something super formal. It matters that you're actively participating in the community and you're giving of yourself to the community so that you can get back from it as well. That's really what it's all about. Lastly, online, you could start like a Zoom group where you meet on Zoom once a month and talk about stuff, or even a Discord, things like that. All of that stuff is extremely valid. Those are really, really good ways, most of which are absolutely free to build a community. And so last thing I want to talk about is once you've gotten to your community, what do you do? How do you maintain the community? And I'm going to say this again because it's so incredibly important. You have to be active. You must participate in the community. Again, can you get anything out of a community by just showing up, sitting in the back, never talking to anybody, never engaging? Maybe, probably not. I would argue that things like professional groups where you're paying a membership fee, which again is often not necessarily cheap, doesn't give you anything unless you take it from that community. You have got to participate in that community. So spending money on a professional organization and not doing anything with it, you're throwing your money away. And I think the professional organizations would agree with that. I don't think anything I'm saying is out of nowhere. I think that you should go to things, like I said before, but when you go to things, do stuff while you're there. Try to talk to 2 or 3 people maybe you don't know. Try to strike up a conversation with someone you maybe haven't met before. Again, this isn't about feeling socially awkward, but you got to remember the people at these things are probably interested in the kind of stuff you're interested in. You probably have a lot to talk about. You might not think you do, but you really do. Additionally, I would try to go to shows, lectures, openings, whatever, of stuff you don't really know that much about. It's just a good way to get exposed to more stuff. Your community might be very, very large, and it might have a whole bunch of different disciplines feeding into it. Go to stuff you're not familiar with. It's a great way to meet new people, learn more stuff that can feed your own practice. I think it's also really useful to be able to share your work with strangers. That doesn't mean carry a portfolio around with you, but that does mean maybe having a website and or a social media account with your work up there. Just so if you're talking to somebody and it gets interesting, you could say, hey, you could check out my Instagram, got a bunch of work up there, or here's my website, things like that. So really community, once again, I'm going to say for like the 5th time in this video, you have got to participate. Nobody is going to hand you a community if you are not willing to participate in it. What makes a community is active participation, not passive participation. You've got to do stuff to get stuff out of it. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.